Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Design and Quilt Monthly. My name is Mark Garretts and I'm a National R&K educator. And this month we are going to be going over how to get the perfect grid size to match the quilt block that you're trying to create. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new quilt block design, and I'm going to use the Advanced Block Creator tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. When you do that, it's going to open up your default quilt size here, and you can see that I've got a grid here. Now we're going to be talking about the grid a lot in today's lesson because the grid is super helpful when we draw lines. So the big tool that we're going to be using is called Snap to Grid. And if I right click on my ruler and then I go to my settings here, you can see that I've got Show Grid checked and Snap to Grid checked. If I uncheck Snap to Grid and I want to start drawing lines, the way you do that, of course, is you click and you drag. So if I wanted to come from this corner, I would click here and drag, say, down to this corner. And you can see it snapped automatically to the corner. But if I wanted to draw a different line, I could get in here and draw this line anywhere I wanted. If I didn't get it straight, you'd see that I could snap to anywhere on my block. I'm going to undo both of those, and I'm going to right click on my ruler again, and this time I'm going to turn on Snap to Grid. And what happens when I do that is when I click, any intersection of two grid lines is where my line is going to snap to start. So if I come over here and I want to draw a line, and I'm right here, I'm not on this intersection here, but if I click here, it's going to snap to that closest intersection anyway. And you can see as I move, it automatically snaps to intersections. And this is super helpful when we are trying to design our quilt block because it helps keep things straight and symmetrical and not crooked. So when we do a quilt block, we can design it out of our head, but most of the time what we're going to do is we'll bring in an existing quilt block picture, which in Design and Quilt we call a backdrop, and then we'll start to trace over it. So the question becomes, how do we use a grid and do that efficiently? So what I'm going to do is do an undo to get rid of that line. And I'm going to come over here to my backdrop tool and I'm going to click it, and it's going to open up a dialog where you can look for your pictures, and I have a folder on my desktop called Quilt Pics, and I'm going to open up one, and let me see what I got. I'm going to open up this flying geese picture here, and this is a JPEG image of a quilt block, and you can see that my quilt default block size doesn't match this. And I can look over here with my backdrop still selected, I can see that it's a 6 by 6 inch picture. So I need to change my quilt block dimensions to match the picture. I can also change the picture to match the quilt block, but let's not do that right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on any of the quilt block design tools. So I'm going to click on the line tool to get out of backdrop mode. And over here I've got my width and my height, and I'm going to change it to 6 and 6, and I'm going to click apply, and you can see I'm going to double click my magnifying glass to zoom in a little bit. Okay, and you can see here that my grid lines line up with my quilt block edges, and the idea is that when we start to draw our lines, every place we have a point of a quilt piece, we need to have a grid line intersection there. Okay, and you can see that my default of 1/4 inch, and let's go to my grid settings and look and see what I have here. So I go to my grid settings and you can see my grid spacing is 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. And I've got my grid major turned off. These are extra lines you can have to show inch marks and things. I've got them turned off for now. So you can see that this works because I've got a grid intersection at each point, and I look at all my points here, and I can see that that works. Now I've got more grid intersections than I need, but that's kind of okay. So that would work for this quilt block. Now, what if we have a quilt block where we need to figure out what the quilt block intersection size is? So, in other words, what's the size of our intersection of blocks? Where do we want our grid lines so that they match all the points? So one way we can do that is we can actually measure. Now, this one is pretty straightforward. By looking at it, you can kind of see that each block is symmetrical pretty much, and they're squares, and we can use various tools to measure the block size, but I can tell because it's 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch in each one of these mini grids that I've got a 1 inch by 1 inch block. So if I were to set my grid size to 1 inch by 1 inch, so let's change it to 1 by 1 and click OK. You can see that this matches up perfectly. I don't have any extra grid block lines. So either way would work. So this one's pretty straightforward. But how do I determine what this size is? So other than by looking, we can actually measure. So we've got a tool over here to measure with. And it's conveniently called the ruler tool. So if I click on it, I'm going to get a little icon that looks like a ruler with a square, a cross, and I can come onto my quilt and I can line up to the edge of any line, click and drag across. When I do that, it's going to give me a little kind of a rectangle to help me get straight. So when I don't have any jagged lines in the rectangle, I can know that I'm straight. And I'm having trouble with my mouse. There we go. So 0.99. So that's an inch, all right? So I could tell that this was an inch. So this one's pretty easy because all of the places I need to measure are pretty obvious. But what if we have a quilt block that's not particularly obvious? So let's go ahead and get rid of this design. I'm just going to close it. I'm not going to change my, save my changes. I'm going to do another one, okay? And I'm going to bring in a different backdrop. So I'm going to come here to my backdrop tool, and this time what I'm going to load is this cactus bud picture here. And once again, you can see that my quilt size and my picture size don't match. So let's fix it. So this says it's 13 inches. Well, that's pretty big. Tell you what, let's make this an 8-inch quilt block. So we'll go by 8 by 8 and click apply. And then we want to center this on the screen. So we know that the center of 8 by 8 is 4. So I'm going to put -4 for the X and +4 for the Y, and click apply. And you can see now it matches up to my block. But you can see that, let me double click my magnifying glass to zoom out. So you can see here that my grid lines no longer match. So how do I figure out what is going to match? I could do that a couple different ways. I can come into my grid settings and I can start changing them till I find something that matches. Or I can do a different, more straightforward trick. And that is using something called guidelines. And the way we create a guideline is we come up to our ruler, either horizontal or vertical, and we click and drag down, and this creates a guideline. So what I want to do is I want to make a guideline every place there's a horizontal line. So right there. And I'm going to do it again for here. Okay, I'm going to get pretty close. There we go. And I don't need to do it for the edges because there's already an automatic sort of guideline there. And I need to do it now for the vertical lines. So I'll come over here and I'll click and I'll drag this way. Okay, there's another one. And I'll click and I'll drag this way. All right, so does that work? Well, it works for some of it, but look, here's a point here where I have a point and a point here and I have a point, but I don't have a guideline. So what I'm going to do is create a guideline that matches those points. Okay, so there's that one. And I can go ahead and do this one, but what I want to do is match that point in the other direction. So I'm going to come down with a horizontal guideline and match that point. And now look what's happened. I've created a little square here. All right, and so that's a good clue that this square size is what our grid size needs to be. Because looking around, now this point and this point here are the 2 points that are kind of, and this one, they're kind of hanging out in space, but they're symmetrical. So I know that this grid size is going to be what we need. So how do we figure out what this is? Well, we can come over here and we can look on our ruler and see. That's a little difficult to read. So let's use our measuring tool again. So I'm going to click my measuring tool, my ruler, and I'm going to get close to this grid line here, click across, get straight, and come on, mouse. All right, it's 0.69 inches. Okay, so you know what? That's going to be 0.7 probably. Let's measure the other direction and see what we have. And that says 0.68. Okay, so I know this is 8 inches, and I know that 0.7 and 0.68 don't actually divide evenly into 8. What does is going to be 0.66. All right, so let's go to our grid settings. I'm going to right click on my ruler, go to grid settings, and let's just try our first measurement, which was 0.7. So let's do 0.7 by 0.7 and click OK. And you can see it's okay, but it's not perfect. All right, so let's try again. Let's go to 0.66 like I think. So 0.66, and let's do tab 0.66 and click OK. All right, and now we're pretty close. Okay, we can see that we're pretty close. So you look down here, we have a little bit of a gap. So 0.66 wasn't quite enough, and what we really want to do is put in an extra 6. Okay, because this measurement keeps going out forever, but we can only have 3 decimal places. So I'm going to put in 0.666 and click OK, and now you can see our grid lines up perfectly. So if I was going to create these blocks now, I would come, I'm already on my right tool, so I would come here. I already have snap to grid checked. Let me make sure. Yep, I have snap to grid checked. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to click. I'm going to, oops, I'm in my measurement tool. Hold on. I'm going to go into my block line tool, click here, and drag across, let off, and I've got perfect lines. And now if I want to do this one, I can come here and click, and you can see I go straight to there. Click here, and you can see that that point snaps right to where I need to be. So this would be how I would continue to draw these lines to create this quilt block. Let's do another one that's not quite as obvious. Let's get a new design here, and let's do another new advanced block. And we are going to bring in a different backdrop. So let me go to my backdrop tool, and for this one I'm going to bring in this bat wings design. Okay, now this has a couple problems. Number one is I can see my outline of my picture is actually bigger than the image, and so my backdrop width is 6 1/4, but my picture is actually smaller than that. And I want to make my picture, the actual image, the correct size. All right, so what I'm going to do is I could grab my ruler and I could measure it, but I still have to kind of account for this extra little border, and it's not symmetrical around it. So here's a cool way to do it. When I'm in backdrop mode, and I can tell I'm in backdrop mode because I can see my backdrop over here, and I've got my backdrop tool selected. If I didn't have it selected, if I was in line mode, I could come back and I could click my backdrop tool to reselect the backdrop. So when I'm in backdrop if I right click on the backdrop, I have a cool tool called Define Scale. So I'm going to click Define Scale, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to this edge. I'm going to use this line here because it's easier to line up with a horizontal line in the picture. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag across till I get to the other side of my image area. And I'm going to let off the mouse, and this says the line that I made is 6.07. I really don't want 0.07, I want 6. So if I type in a 6 now, it's going to resize this so that line that I just drew and everything that it touches, basically the picture, is going to be resized so that is 6 inches. So if I click OK, now that is 6 inches. Now what I can do is come up here to my line tool to get out of backdrop mode, and once again I'm going to reset my quilt block size to match my image size, which is now 6 inches. So I'm going to change this one to 6, and because I have keep aspect ratio checked, the height automatically changes to 6. I'm going to click apply, and you can see it's going to resize. Now it doesn't line up perfectly, but I can try to adjust it. But you can also see that my grids are not even close to being lined up. So let's just use our trick that we just learned with guidelines to see where we need to have our grid size. And then we can, if we want to, we can try and line it up a little better. So I'm going to start drawing my horizontal guidelines. So there's one, there's another, and those are actually the only two that we need for this quilt block. And I'm going to do another one here. Okay, and I'm going to do another one here. All right, and this looks like we might be done. Look, here's a square. But the problem is that I've got other points that don't fall on any grid lines, and that's this point right here. So I need to draw another vertical grid line to line this point up. Okay, so there we go. All right, now I don't need in my quilt a line in the center, but I'm going to assume I want to make squares in my grid. So I could either draw a line in the center, or I can figure out what that is just by measuring across this dimension. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to grab our ruler tool. We're going to measure across this dimension. And we've got 0.5. So ½ an inch. All right. So let's go to our grid settings. And let us make our spacing ½ an inch. So 0.5, tab, and 0.5. And I'm going to click OK. And you can see that now we're almost lined up. Okay, so the reason this is not lined up is because our backdrop isn't exactly centered on the grid. Now I'm going to get rid of my guidelines. The way we do that is we come here and we right click on the ruler and we click remove guidelines. Okay, so I could start moving my backdrop to line this up, or I could move the quilt block to line this up. So we could try that. Let's do that. Let's go click our backdrop tool, and we know we need to move down a little bit, or actually up a little bit. So I'm going to click it and move it up. Now unfortunately we can't see it move, and I clicked a little bit to the right, so I'm going to move a little bit to the right, left, and there we go. So I just kind of estimated that. I'm going to come back here to my quilt line tool, and now I can start drawing this block. So let's go ahead and draw this block so you can see how we would do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw my diagonals. Okay, there's one, there's another, and you can see with snap to grid turned on how quick and easy and fast this is. Okay, I'm going to do these horizontal lines all the way across. Okay, I don't need to do from here to here because when I do this line, it'll break this up. So I'm going to do this one from here to here and this one from here to here. And that's it. So let me turn off my backdrop. I do that with this tool right here, the backdrop icon, show or hide it. Click that, and there's my block. All right, so now I'm going to go to my piece select tool, and I'm going to start coloring it in. I'm going to turn my backdrop on just for a second so I can see what colors I have. So I have kind of a burgundy and a beige and a black. All right, so if I want to make this the same colors, what I would do is I would turn off my backdrop now. And I'm going to select these triangles. So I'm going to click that one. I'm going to hold down the control key on the keyboard and click the second one and the third one and the fourth one. So I've got all four of these selected. I'm going to assign a burgundy color. So let's use this one. All right, and then these were all beige. So I'm going to click that, hold down control, 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 click, make these a beige. So let's do this beige here. And finally, this one was black. So I'll click that and click black. And that is how we create our quilt block using our grid lines and snap to grid and guidelines to quickly and easily create a quilt block from a picture. So I want to thank you for watching and invite you to come back next month for another edition of Design and Quilt Monthly.